All right, so today we're doing a video about the X5M. This is the E70 X5M. So, if you don't know, this car went into production in 2009. 2010 was the first year release. And this car carried the S63, not the TU, the regular S63. All right, so this car was released to compete with Mercedes ML63 AMG, the Porsche Cayenne Turbo, which are all over 500 horsepower, and the Jeep SRT8. So I've been seeing these cars for sale, and you can find one of these broken pretty easily. S63, especially pre-TU engines, you can find broken pretty regularly. They had rod bearing problems, they had piston ring problems. Some of the earlier ones had turbo issues, on and on and on. Now, this is the same year span as F10M5, right? This is when F10M5 started in 2011. Now, this is cheaper than the F10M5. A couple reasons for that. One, I think an all-wheel drive SUV takes a certain kind of person to buy that with that much power. Your average family is not really going to want that. It's kind of a specialty SUV. It's not a daily driver per se. So we see these broken, like still running, mildly broken. I was onto one for 11 grand and I passed on it. That was 2011. There's another one on it right now for 16 grand. So they're fairly cheap and still running condition. Now, it's common knowledge at this point, if you buy one of these, and let's say it has, most of these had 93 to 101,000 miles on it. On that engine, you're at the mileage. If it's not grenaded yet, that's an engine out car. What I mean by that, if I bought one with 100,000 miles, we'd definitely bring it in here, engine out. You have to do rod bearings, probably main bearings while you're there. Piston rings, if the have a bad issue on those with the piston clearance on the pistons being a little bit tight, same thing Toyota had, and it would gum up the piston rings and you have blow by, right? So there is that. There's also 1,000 other things. You're also due for all the coolant lines of that mileage, things like that. So I really had to limit myself and say, do I want to buy this? I'm not big on the S63 engine either way. Is this going to be a horrible financial mistake? Probably not. But you do have to look at, we buy them for the channel, what's it worth when it's fixed? How much does it cost to fix it? Probably costs about 3 grand just to get in there and put that engine back to factory. Maybe a little less, maybe a little more, depends on what you find once you get in there. If you want to build the engine out, which a lot of guys are doing now, different rods, different pistons, you can spend $5,000 or $7,000 doing that. Depends on how far you want to go with it, right? On and on and on. Then if you do that, you're going to want to tune, you're going to want this, you're going to want that, exhaust, this and that. But somebody that's going to buy one of these is not going to want an ultra modified one, right? This not. Then you're going to break transfer case. You're going to have drive shaft problems. You could put a bunch of power to it. Since it's all-wheel drive, it's not like a car where it's going to break the tires loose. It's all-wheel drive. It's locked in. It's going to launch and just break stuff. And they had problems with the transfer cases and those breaking when people modified them, and so on and so on and so on. So, I mean, overall, it's not a bad car. It's tempting. A lot of this stuff's tempting. And that's not even to say expensive brakes, you know, control arm is going to be on the way out at 100,000 miles. Interior might be showing some wear at 100,000 miles, depends on who had it. And then what other electronic issues are going to be in there. How much is that going to cost, right? Are you going to have any modules that are down? Are you going to clone stuff? What all is going on with that? And then you get a car with that age on it and that mileage, the paint's not going to be perfect, no matter what. Then you have all this money in this car. Is it worth doing it? Well, that's things you got to look at. So one of these stock will go 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. You think, well, that's not that fast at all, right? Porsche Cayman will do better than that. It will. It's got less power, but it's like our M5 back here. It's heavy. The X5M is super heavy. It's over 5,000 pounds. You have to consider all this stuff in consideration. Are you going to build this and have the fastest car in the world? No, you're not. You're just not. Something with 200 less horsepower will probably clean your plate when you pull up next to them. You know, a lot of cars that weigh 2,900 pounds, 2,800 pounds versus what are these 55, 5,700 pounds, something crazy. You literally have to have almost double the horsepower they had to even be the same match to them. And we see this with the diesel guys, with the diesel truck guys here in America. Everybody's trying to run a 3/4 ton full-size diesel truck as a race truck, right? All these kids. But you have to have double the power to get the same effect if you're pulling double the weight. On a big truck, all your gearing's wrong, the transmission's sloppy. You just can't put the power through the gears fast enough to get anywhere with it, right? You see guys spend 50, 60, 70 grand on an engine and pull up against a small car with 300 horsepower and get left behind. You have to take all this in consideration. I'm not dogging anybody. I'm just saying. So yeah, quarter mile time, 12.2 seconds. And that reflects 547 horsepower only relates to 12.2 second quarter mile time, right? So you have to look at that too. X6M is also the same engine, the same way. And sometimes you see X6Ms for cheap, man. But they all say mechanic special, need engine ticking. Well, it's probably not ticking, it's probably knocking. And you see all that stuff, you know, go on the same way. And this car will be made from 2010, 2013, has a pretty narrow production. It really isn't that much. In those years, you can also buy the X5 and 3.0 SI, right? N52, SI should be 3-stage manifold. And you're going to make, at that point in time, 261 horsepower in that versus the X-Drive 30i, the X-Drive 35i, which has, what would it be, N55 those years? And that is 302 horsepower. The 4.8i, 4.8IS, 350 horsepower. So you're getting up there, you're stacking up in the horsepower as we go up the list here. Then the 48i, 2009, 2010, the X-Drive 50i, which would be N63 B44 at 402 horsepower. And then of course we have the X5M, S63 B44, and this one's listed at 547. You see some variations of horsepower on these. It's like anything else. Everybody's a little bit different opinion of it. And that makes that horsepower at 6,000 RPM. So a pretty low revving engine comparable to a Chevy LS. Very low revving, you know, 65, most of those are done. Where you have an off-breed like the E60 M5 that's revving to 83 with the tune 9,100 RPM. That's a totally opposite of the spectrum vehicle. Well, something else interesting is the top speed. And all the 6-cylinder X5, top speed is 130, 140 miles an hour. 4.8 is 149. X5M is 155, electronic and limited 155. And then if you have the M driver's package, is 171 miles an hour. Not that you're going to be going 171 miles an hour in a mid-size SUV, right? That's basically what it is. And then X-Drive 35i, X-Drive 50i are also 155 miles an hour. So it's running the same top speed limited as the N55 ones, right? So there is all that to consider. Overall, at the very end, it is kind of like dating a stripper with a gambling habit. It's going to get you, right? She might look good at first. You might go to pick this car up. She's going to look good. She's got to impress you. The bumpers are cool on it. The problem is, it's just an X5. In the end result, it's still an X5, right? With a bunch of kit, different suspension, different brakes, and different engine. So when you open the door to get in it, if you have a basic M Sport X5, it looks the same on the inside. That's what kind of sucks about it. And you see that with even the M5s. It's the same way, right? At a first glance, you can't tell them apart. At that time, it's just engine and brakes and things like that, mechanicals. You do not get dual clutch. You have the Steptronic transmission in this one. So that's something else to consider too, where on the F10 M5, you get dual clutch. So it's kind of a weird situation with these X5Ms. I really would like to snipe one off if it's cheap enough, but at what cost? An engine's $8,000 if it's blown up, if you can't fix it. A crankshaft's insane money because there's such high demand. People run them and don't do the bearings and ruin the crankshaft, and then there you are. So you might get it back here. I think like a good one is about 18 to 20, right? Let's say you go pay, let's say we'll meet the median. Let's say you pay 15 grand for one of these, and it still runs, but the crankshaft's jacked up because somebody didn't change the bearings. That's very possible. You're going to give $2,000 to $3,000 for a crankshaft if they can't turn yours. Then you're going to have to buy all the bearings and buy all the stuff. You're going to be $5 grand in that car in a heartbeat. If you paid 15 for it, then you're in at 20, but it's not worth 20. That's where the problem is. That's where we see the same way with N63. It's the same damn way. You see those, an F10 550i, right? You see those now that are blowing up for 5 and 6 and 7 grand. But if you need a whole engine, that's like what, 6 grand for N63? Let's say best case you get for 5 grand. Then you're in your car 14 grand. But then you could buy a perfectly running one for 12 or 11. So that's where it's a weird freaking spot. And if you don't watch out, you're going to buy this thing. You're going to try to fix it. You're going to have thousands more than if you just went and bought one that was already running and already totally fine. That's going to be it, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope to give you some insight when you see these cheap X5Ms and X6Ms go through. See you later.